Now, Gary, as we say on this channel, everybody's got a story. So why don't we start with this one? What's your story? What got you here?
Well, and I'll go back to, I know you mentioned my background as a lawyer, but before that, I had been an interpreter, and it really started when I'm originally from Albania. In 1999, I was in Albania when the Kosovo crisis happened. When you had a lot of Kosovo refugees coming into Albania. There was a lot of need at the time for interpreters to be able to interpret because you had all these foreign aid workers operating in English and Italian, etc. But Albanian was a limiting factor. So I volunteered as an interpreter, and that was sort of my first foray into it. Then met some people from UNICEF and Save the Children, and I became an interpreter for UNICEF and Save the Children. As I moved to Canada, I thought, and I really enjoyed being an interpreter. I thought, is there an opportunity to actually do some of that here? And I became an interpreter for the Ministry of the Attorney General, doing some court interpreting, and then interpreting for immigration, etc. So in a variety of different contexts, but that was sort of my initial exposure to the language industry. And then slowly creeped into translation, which was obviously, as anyone in the language industry knows, a very different beast than interpreting, but sort of in the same realm. I At the time I thought maybe this is something I do during university and during law school, etc. It was only as some time went on that I thought there's a real opportunity here to make this into something well beyond just something on the side while in university. So I made that decision after a couple of years in the legal practice, and I said I need to really focus on this. And here we are. This is many years later.
So it's very interesting, though, Gary. You had an experience being an interpreter, and you touched the language industry early on. But most people who have the same experience as you did, they normally go to study linguistics or any form of languages at university. But you decided to go to do a law degree, and then you converted back to language. The career trajectory is it's a little different. I mean, it worked out well for you, but why legal versus going into linguistic initially?
For sure, and I think partially at the time, Robin, was that I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and this was just something that I was going to do on the side versus I'm going to do this for a living. I always enjoyed linguistics. I think I've always had a passion for history, anthropology, linguistics. They're all so intertwined, and it's still a big hobby of mine. I read a lot about it. I think, nevertheless, despite all of that, language professionals are such masters of their craft, and I was always the business guy. So I did the law and MBA program, and I thought, okay, there's professionals at the language that are likely going to be better at this than I am. But let me see if I can bring the need together with the customers, and then get the professionals that are truly the masters of their craft to be able to
Link
service.
it together. So you must have seen a gap then, and that created that business idea for you, right? So you must have determined there is a gap here. I'm noticing, and I got to go fix that a problem, and you found a solution, obviously, right?
Absolutely. And I think you have you and I have been in this business long enough that 20 years ago, the translation industry was growing fast. And as it is today, it continues to grow in a different fashion, mind you, but it continues to grow. So I was also trying to look for this highly specialized areas, and I gravitated towards the legal financial space considering my background. And I thought this area keeps growing as Canada becomes a larger and larger country and does more business internationally. Canadian organizations are going to need this in a variety of different languages. So I thought specialize. So as we actually started with the business, the scope got narrower and narrower because I said, really, in the legal financial space, we can do a lot more in the highly regulated industries than we could, for example, in areas that we didn't have the same level of specialization, or where there were a lot of organizations that could do a pretty good job at it. So the niche piece of it, I think, was important because that's that's about any business, right? The blue ocean theory. Like when you actually create a niche, it's easier to become better and better at it, and then add value to your customer.